Keynote. Oh, I should have listened to that. Welcome, everyone. We're back for another wonderful keynote at Otessa Online 2026. I'm introducing Robert Luke, who's Chief Executive Officer with eCampus Ontario, which is a leader in Canada and globally for educational technology, open education, and all things innovation. So, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Robert to share his talk with us. And thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Valerie, and thank you for your leadership in Canada, well, globally, through OTESA. I always appreciate the opportunity to work with you and to come and chat with folks about stuff that we're really interested in, specifically around things like open education and digital options for learning. But before I begin, I do want to acknowledge that eCampus Ontario is based in the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. It's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And also want to acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We have a commitment here at eCampus Ontario, as I'm sure all do, to supporting reconciliation and decolonization and to talk learning, or what I'm going to be talking about ultimately to AI fluency. And I did want to take a quick moment to, again, acknowledge the great work that Valerie is doing at OTESA and the Open Technology and Education Society and Scholarship Association, of which we are proud to be a supporter. What I am talking about specifically is open technology in education and society. So I'm going to be talking about a couple things today that we feel are important with respect to how open technology, open learning really, and what I'm going to be calling free learning, and technology can produce digital options for people in order to create pathways to access and empowerment. I would say too, feel free to interrupt along the way if you have questions. We will have some time at the end for Q&A as well, if you have any to say. So my basic premise here, or my thesis, is that open education, digital delivery models, or options for learning as we call it, digital fluency, and micro-credentials can provide a more equitable and affordable education landscape for students across Canada. So that's what I'm going to be threading throughout the time that we have today. Now, this statement actually comes from something called the Canadian Coalition for Affordable Learning, of which eCampus Ontario is a member. And you can see there that we have 4 strands of work, which includes the adoption and promotion of open educational resources, improving alternative and flexible delivery modalities such as online and hybrid courses and programs, so that's the micro-credential side, enhancing access to new learning paths such as through micro-credentials, and enhancing the digital fluency of educators to more effectively leverage digital teaching and learning environments. The Canadian Coalition of Affordable Learning is supported by OTESA, as well as the other organizations that you see here, our colleagues at BC Campus and Campus Manitoba, Colleges and Institutes Canada, Atlantic OER, the Council of Atlantic Academic Libraries, and the Indigenous Institutes Consortium. And this coalition is really, well, it's exactly what you think it is. It's a coalition of folks who are interested in supporting the principles of the things that OTESA stands for, which is open education and technology designed learning for digital options to create more affordable pathways for learning for everybody across the country. So here's what we're going to talk about today over the next 45 minutes or so. We will be ending at about 3:50, but I'm going to end in advance of that so that we can have some questions and answers. And I actually can't see the chat really well right now, so if there are questions coming through, maybe somebody can just let me know. So I'm going to tell you a very brief bit about eCampus Ontario. Then we're going to talk about disruption, and specifically about open education and micro-credentials in Ontario. Then we're going to talk a little bit about access and what we're doing for micro-credentials, both in Ontario and across the country. And then I'm going to end with free learning for AI fluency as one of the key planks that we're trying to support here in terms of access and empowerment. I'll take a brief detour first and talk about artificial intelligence. You can go to eCampusOntario.ai and you can see a little bit about how we are convening the sector's the output of our members, so the folks that we represent who are working in artificial intelligence. But we think of AI as both a subject and as an object. As a subject, we study it. We study the bias and the biases inherent in artificial intelligence. We think about the ethics of AI. We think about why and how it should be used. But we also think of it as an object. That is to say that we use it quite actively as a tool. And I'll be talking a little bit about some of the ways that we do that throughout our time together today. So briefly then about eCampus Ontario, we are a not-for-profit organization. We're funded primarily by the Ontario government's Ministry of Colleges, Universities, Research Excellence and Security. And our goal is to support innovation, collaboration, and education in Ontario's 58 colleges, Indigenous institutes, and universities. So that's all of the publicly assisted post-secondary education institutions in Ontario. We help advance digital participation in post-secondary education, as it says, and our mission here is to connect Ontario's post-secondary system and the learners to the future of learning and the future of work. You can see here also that we focus significantly on helping our members to save money through reduced costs and the power of scale. Also students too. I'll talk about saving students money, and also about increasing new and incremental forms of revenue. That's very important in this time when the entire sector is still coming to terms with the changes in international students. It's about a $2 billion annual revenue gap that is here in Ontario, and I think it's $4 billion across the country. So it's a significant opportunity for us, notwithstanding the fact that there have been many people impacted, thousands of people unfortunately have been laid off, hundreds of programs have been closed. But our goal is to say, well, how can we leverage this moment to redesign post-secondary education to most effectively fit the future of learning and the future of work? So let's talk a little bit about disruption and a brief history of open education as we know it here at eCampus Ontario. If you go to Google and ask when this started, you'll go all the way back to 2015 when eCampus Ontario was started, and the starting of the Open Library, which now is Canada's largest library of open educational resources, was situated in 2017. Between 2018 and 2020, the Empowered Educator program was launched. It used to be called the Ontario Extend, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And something called the OER Ranger program, which was a program where staff and faculty in our member institutions were encouraged to be that pathfinder and help others learn about OER and learn how to adopt them. I joined in September of 2020, and from 21 to 24, we supported what was called the virtual learning strategy. And you can see the three components that comprise the virtual learning strategy: being the future, being a lifelong learner, and being a global leader, were how we were supporting that. And that was a $70 million investment in the future of learning, half of which, $35 million, went to support the provision, the development, or the translation, adoption, and adaptation of open educational resources. So it's quite a successful and at-scale investment that the government made in supporting open education and really digital learning, broadly speaking. It was launched in the early days of the pandemic, but it was not born of the pandemic. It was actually part of the Future State Modernization Committee. So it was the virtual learning strategy was an initiative that predates the pandemic, but certainly when we were all pivoting online for emergency remote teaching, that became even more important. And it was in many respects an impetus to support the further development of digital by design options for learning for those in Ontario. At the end of that, around 2024, we launched the OER Foundations, or Mastering Open Ed, which is a micro-credential program that we offer. Along the way, we supported this work with Rajiv Janjiani from Brock University on a path to open, which, as you can see there, a report on the capacity of Ontario's post-secondary institutions to support open educational practices. And that's a very important milestone in many respects because It allowed us to have a view for the first time of the institutions that are adopting OER, where they are on the adoption of open pedagogy more broadly, but most importantly, how ready were they in order to scale that kind of disruption. Finally, in 2026, taking us up almost to the present, we've launched what we call the Open Ed Navigator, which is a GPT that resides on the Open Library so that you can interact with it in order to find the tools that you need. If you go to openlibrary.ecampusontario.ca, this is what you see. You can see up in the top left. You can search or you can ask AI. When you ask AI, that little wizard comes up, and you can say, find me an OER in whatever topic that you like. The big thing for us here is the statistics on the bottom about how many adoptions we've been supporting. We've supported 164 institutions globally, 400, just over 400,000 learners, and just under $40 million of learner savings. And that's very, very significant. It is also an undercount. We rely on people to tell us when they have adopted an OER, and then there's a calculator to say how much money you've saved students. So we know that it's an undercount, but nonetheless, it's a very important measure that we produce in order to support the students and the learners here in Ontario. Furthering the theme of disruption, I want to talk a little bit about increasing digital participation here, because on the faculty and staff side, we operate a bunch of different professional learning programs. The Anatomy of an Empowered Educator was developed quite some time ago, and you can see that this micro-credential is comprised of these 6 modules that you can take, which is really about supporting the development of digital fluency in teaching and learning. You can see there on the right side the list of programs that we have, including the Empowered Educator, but also there's a micro-credential on teaching with AI, the OER Foundations, which I already mentioned, online teaching fundamentals, which is important, Empowered Digital Transformation Leader for those who are interested in transformation numérique, or digital transformation, and then strategic foresight in identifying signals of change. So these are all micro-credential programs that anybody can access at learn.ecampusontario.ca. So I'm going to continue the theme of disruption and go on to micro-credential development. And again, here's the brief history of micro-credential development here in Ontario. One gap, which I'll talk about in a moment. The micro-credentials principles and framework was launched in 2017. And this was a landmark publication. It was co-designed by many in the sector that supported at the time, what were new micro-credentials in a way that we could start thinking about how to put these together in ways that are useful and usable to both learners and institutions. In 2021, we launched the micro-credential toolkit, which included the competency framework development canvas. And these are tools that anybody can use. These are all freely available to support the development of micro-credentials specifically. You can see that there's a few reports listed from our research and foresight group. First one there in 2023, one of many that they've done on wallets, passports, portfolios, and credentials. This was a small sample size of folks who we asked about what do they want in a digital portfolio for their micro-credentials. And it's got some pretty good feedback for how the system might start thinking about these kinds of wallets or passports that people can use for displaying or housing their micro-credentials. In 2024, we launched something called Skills Finder, which was a GPT that linked to the micro-credential portal, which I'm going to talk about in a quick second. And skillsfinder.ai is available. It's freely available. It does require a login on a GPT license, but it is free to use. And this is quite simply a GPT that looks specifically at the micro-credential portal to help people access the kind of learning that is going to get them, when they want to reskill or upskill. You can also update your resume or upload your resume onto this, and it will look at your resume and say, well, based on this, maybe you want to consider this course. We do have an agreement with BC Diploma. It says there since 2025, they're what we use, not British Columbia, but blockchain digital credentials that we use to deploy micro-credentials and badges here in the Ontario sector. And lastly, this year, our research and foresight team put out a couple of frameworks and a case study here for creating a bilingual micro-credential and also designing a suite of micro-credentials. So some useful tools that folks can use. So as you can see, over the last 10 years, we've been very active both in the open education space and the micro-credential space. And I'm calling those disruptions because they are, in effect, disrupting the environment of post-secondary education, both in terms of how students acquire or access learning resources, but also how learners can access learning itself. And that's a good segue into the digital access part of this. And I'm going to first talk about microlearnontario.ca. Now, this is Ontario's micro-credentials portal. This is the first provincial database in Canada. It was launched in the fall of 2021, and it did align with a very historic change in OSAP, or the Ontario Student Assistance Program, which meant that you could get OSAP for a part-time program. Up until that moment, if you wanted to get a student loan, you needed to be going to school full-time. And the government at the time realized that it would be really helpful if people were able to access educational options while they were working, so not full-time. So that's quite a significant change that I think has had incremental impact on the sector. Microlearn Ontario was part of a pandemic recovery strategy for displaced workers, and it is integrated with the Job Bank, a Canada Job Bank, which I'll talk about soon. You can see here some of the analytics. The 58 presidents that I work for are most interested in that over $64 million in additional revenue impact over this time. But there's been quite a lot of people that are coming through this. We have 50 of our 58 members participating there, and there's nearly 3,000 courses listed. That number goes up and down depending on what's available at any given time. And you can explore that at microlearnontario.ca or through that QR code. Last year on September 5th, Prime Minister Carney named eCampus Ontario as a partner in building Canada's future workforce. And this is when we launched something called skillsforjobs.ca. So this is continuing the theme of digital access, only this time we took what we do on the Ontario Microcredentials portal and we put that across the entire country. We're currently representing 8 provinces. You can see there that there's nearly 5,000 courses available. So this was launched in September 2025, and again, direct response to labor market volatility, and this time posed by tariffs, its own kind of pandemic, I suppose. It does provide a central catalog of upskilling and reskilling opportunities across Canada. It is really the only comprehensive listing of accessible short-form education in the country. And it enables learners to discover these regionally tailored, career-aligned opportunities. It also has an employer interface, so employers can go there and they can find specific upskilling opportunities for their employees, or they can find opportunities to recruit people from programs. So the key thing about these platforms is it is widening the access to post-secondary education in ways and in formats that are supportive of those who are economically displaced. And that's really an important point that I hope we can keep in mind. Our systems of education were designed for people coming out of high school, but that is in fact the minority of learners in the system today. And with the labor market volatility that is happening, we need to ensure that our education systems are as accessible as possible in order to increase the options for learning for anybody who needs to access education. I did mention earlier that both of these platforms are integrated with the Job Bank. This is very important. So if you go to the Job Bank's training finder, there's a screenshot there, you're going to be searching the Skills for Jobs Canada database. There are other courses on there as well, but I think we're listing 95 or so % of the programs that are there. This is quite significant. As you can see here, the job bank user traffic is pretty significant, and 10% of Canadian workers each month that are coming. And this is new awareness generation for the sector. So we see this of the 100 or so institutions that are on Skills for Jobs Canada from across the 8 provinces. They're able to reach more learners in ways that they might not otherwise have been able to. And one of the things that we do here is assign labor market information to courses and programs. So this slide, I'm going to just pause on this because it's going to become very, very important to what we're doing for free learning. So you can see here that when folks are uploading courses into the database, and the Ontario Microcredential Portal and Skills for Jobs Canada uses the same database, it just has different presentations for it, depending on where you're coming from. So if you're coming from in Ontario, you only see, on Skills for Jobs Canada, you'll only see the Ontario or Alberta or Saskatchewan courses. Those are what you will see first. But we have spent the last 2 years teaching large language models how to assign NOC, NAICS, SIP, OASIS, and ONET taxonomies to courses and programs at scale. And this is quite important because it ensures that learners are, when they're coming for upskilling or reskilling, they can search based on job title, skills, tools, technologies, keywords, and industries, but they will also know when they go there what skills and competencies a particular micro-credential teaches, what tools and technologies it talks about, what careers or what industries is the program relevant to. And that's a very, very important thing that we can do that can empower people, particularly those who are economically displaced from employment, to learn what is the best course or program that I can take today that is going to help me realize what I need in order to, start my new career. Um, so really, when we talk about digital access, we're here to support workforce development at scale. And this is what Skills for Jobs Canada is doing. I mean, you can see the pieces on the bottom. The little graphics there, that this is just a kind of a representation of what people come when they come onto the platform. They can see recommended training. There's a little, graph bar of a 5-year outlook. So if something is looking like it's full strength Wi-Fi signal, the 5-year outlook is quite good. There are tags for OSAP or any student loan programs. I think Alberta has programs on there for student loans as well. And you can see if it's a hot job, because we're pulling labor market information. If the course is relevant to a job that had high demand in the past 12 months, they could see that it's in a hot field of demand. And over on the right side is just a little bit of example for some of the clues that they get about what skills are inherent in the micro credentials that they're looking for. And I should also point out, we don't care if a course is called a micro credential or not. We are interested in any short form learning that institutions want to list. So we are actively supporting, we're a partner, as I said, with the federal government here in supporting folks who are at risk of displacement, particularly due to tariffs. There is something called work sharing agreements that exist, which are such that if an employer is at risk of laying people off, they can apply to participate in the work share agreement, which gives them the opportunity to keep their employees on payroll. The EI will top up their salary, and the employers will then send them into training. And there's 3 ways that they can do that. They can be trained to do their existing job better, or with new technology like AI. They can be trained to do another job in the company if the company has to change entirely, or they can be trained to do another job elsewhere. And this is a very important program that the federal government operates, because it allows for companies across business, like sectors of the economy, important sectors of the economy, it allows them to get some time to pivot their operations and their people. So it's actually a very, very good way of supporting people to learn new skills and help their employers to pivot according to the economy that they're operating in. We obviously, as it says here, are aware of the top 20 industry segments that are impacted, and so we have directed a page on the Skills for Jobs Canada site to support them specifically. And there's a couple of examples there. You can go browse by industry, or just go and do an open search. And I want to come back to my thesis, because what I've been talking about so far is, first of all, digital disruption and the supporting of things like open education and micro-credentials. Then we talked about digital access, specifically through two channels that we operate on micro-credentials, so one provincially and one nationally at scale, and what this means to digital empowerment. And so I'm hoping that through this, you can see that we are supporting open education, digital delivery models, digital fluency, and micro-credentials in order to support equitable and affordable education for all learners across the country. And that's really important when we think about access, particularly those who are economically displaced. So that's a good segue into what I want to talk about here, which is free learning, and specifically free learning as it pertains to artificial intelligence. So back in February, in concert with the federal government, when they announced the changes, or not the changes, but the new Workshare program, we launched what are a host of 7 modules created by our member and our partner, Durham College. They run a technology access center for AI, so they're a center of excellence in AI. And we asked them to create these modules. Now, the free access to AI Fluency was specifically designed to support people who are economically displaced. And I'll come back to the resources that are supporting learning how to learn. So I live just outside of Toronto, and in this region, I think there's something like 12,000 or so people who have lost their jobs in the auto industry as a result of direct impact of tariffs. Now, those jobs may or may not be coming back, but it is a significant economic disruption to our economy in one of the largest sectors of our economy here in Ontario. So finding ways to support those people is really important. And the use case that we used to design these programs, or this suite of modules, was the 38-year-old person who was laid off from the auto industry after working there for 20 years, have graduated high school, got a job at in the automotive industry, and has been working in a good paying job for 20 years. Well, that person now is no longer working in the auto industry and needs to retrain. There's no option but to retrain. And that person also has been out of education potentially for a long time. So it's not just that they need to learn content, but they need to learn how to learn. And that's a very, very important principle that underwrote what we are trying to do here. So these modules, particularly the first 3 that you see there, or 4 really, are pitched at a very basic level in order to ensure that as many people as possible can access them. Now, you could go to Coursera, and you could take an AI course from there. You could take a Google course, such as what is offered through Amy, Module Zero, I think it's called. Module Zero is actually available on Skills for Jobs Canada, repackaged through some of the folks that are partnered with the Alberta Machine Learning Institute. But those are pitched at people in post-secondary education already, generally speaking. And they're quite sophisticated, and they generally assume that you're going to be possibly a software engineer, or at least learning about engineering. So our goal was to say, well, that's a reasonable course, and those are freely available as well. How do we get somebody from where they are today, 38, needs to learn about AI, probably heard about it, probably already uses it, but needs to understand now there's actually many types of AI, and it's applicable across industries, and there are safe and responsible uses for it. You can see that we do get into privacy, security, and sovereignty, and also intellectual property, because these people who are taking these might become certainly a job taker. They might take a job somewhere, but they also might be a job maker. They might have an idea for a startup that they want to do, and they need to understand about AI as well. So the full suite of modules was launched in April. When we launched in February, I think there was maybe two available. Sorry, I can't remember. It might have been three, but all seven are available. And since then, as of May 28, we've had 38 people successfully complete all seven self-paced modules in the program. So that's a big success for us that we're really pleased to celebrate. I mentioned the additional learning resources, specifically about learning how to learn. And you can see that there's one example there from the Open Library, which is specifically called Learning to Learn Online, which is really good because one of the things what we're hoping that people get here is that they can learn how to learn so that they can access more learning. We also link to skillsfinder.ai and a GPT called AI in My Job, produced by a company called Technion, which is a partner for us in developing some of our other AI platforms. So these are all free for people to access in order to really start to learn about how can I reskill myself, how can I learn about artificial intelligence, and how does that apply to the job that I do today or the job that I want to do tomorrow. And so that brings me to what we're doing at scale. So this is why we are talking about free learning. Now, it's free to the end user, of course, but it's not always free to produce, and that's a very important consideration. Those of you who work in the open education field understand that there are costs to this, and we support those costs ourselves. But really what we are doing now is assigning labor market information to open educational resources. We are now distributing those OER as micro-credentials so that there's more free access to career relevant learning at scale. So in short, that means we take our large language model that knows how to assign labor market information, we point it at the open library and we say, go and find stuff that are self-contained enough, self-contained resources that if they were made freely available, well, they already are freely available, because they're on the open library, but we can push them into a learning management system or some other mechanism so that people can get in there and learn skills. And we see that as very, very important, not just for learning content, and that content could be about AI, as I said, but it could be also about learning how to support people in a social service agency or learning how to support sales in a company. The point is that it's free learning content while also teaching how to learn. So these are very important for access. As it says here, it's absolutely essential for those experiencing disruption in employment and in education. So if you've been out of education for a long time and you want to get back in, micro-credentials are the on-ramp to get into there. So we see this as an AI-powered skills pathway that is enabling on-ramps for learning. And what that means very simply is that those who are in employment or not in employment or in education or not in education and need to get into learning and further career growth, that we are doing whatever we can to support them to access free learning so they can learn the content that they want to learn and they can learn how to learn as well. Because eventually they are going to go on to other learning and other programs that are relevant to the careers that they want. And again, this comes back to my basic thesis about digital empowerment. And hopefully through these examples, you can see how what we are doing through the tools that we have developed, the AI tools, the systems and the platforms, but also the content that exists across the network of people who are and institutions who are supporting open education and open educational resources, that we are in effect having quite significant reach into those who need to be accessing education for further for personal growth or career growth. And we see that as one of our core missions around digital empowerment. I started by saying that eCampus Ontario is supporting digital participation in education and the economy, and this is one of the ways, significant ways that we are doing that. That is all I had to say today, and I think we have about 15 minutes or so for some Q&A, so I'm happy to take some questions if anybody has any. And feel free to reach out to me.
Okay. Thank you so much, Robert. I super appreciate it's amazing everything that you've been doing at eCampus Ontario. So I actually look forward to following up on some of these links and seeing if I can even take some of those things from you. Um,
Absolutely.
Katie, I'll invite you to stop recording so we can then open the floor for questions from everybody or comments or kudos.